Hey everyone, welcome to the first TKYT session of 2025. It we had a great session last year, and I'm pretty excited to be having Matt Perry on this one, mostly because I suck at animation, but Matt is great at animation on the web, so it's going to help educate me on animations because of its project called Motion, and I'm going to talk about it with React. So, how you doing, Matt? Hello there, friend. So it has come to my attention that about 95% of the people who watch the videos on this channel don't subscribe. My goal is to get that number down to 50%. So if you're watching this video and you've liked it so far, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. I would really appreciate if you do. Now let's get back into the video.
Yeah, really good, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, show some motion off. Don't know, yeah, we'll see how far we get. But we should learn a few things, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get started with a little bit of background story about you. So you tell us who Matt is, what you've been doing, and what you're here for, of course.
Yeah, so I've been writing animation libraries for about 10 years now. I started with Pop Motion, which is like a JavaScript animation library, but it was kind of like really low level. So which meant you could do anything with it, but it also meant that perhaps it wasn't as accessible for people to use. And in my job, I was like implementing it into the website and mixing the website was built in React and mixing the imperative language, like PopMotion had like an imperative API, so which means essentially like you initiate a series of actions. So you'll say animate this, and then it will do it. Whereas CSS is a bit more declarative, like you describe like how something should work, like when this changes, animated like this. And mixing those two, like because React is also declarative, mixing those two paradigms was really like the source of a few bugs. So I started working on a library called Pose, which was like a React wrapper around Hot Motion, and it just made things like a lot more Reacty, I guess. And it just brought Spring animations and stuff into that world of into that world of declarativeness. And then I went to Framer, which is like a no code. Now it's a no code web builder, and built Framer Motion for about that must have been 6 years. And then just recently, I took it independently, so it's now just Motion, and it's still got all those declarative APIs. It's got some imperative APIs for people who use vanilla JS or want to integrate it into something that isn't React. And just recently, we also launched Motion for Vue, which sort of brings all those declarative APIs from Motion for React, as the name suggests, into Vue.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a journey. So you I probably see you as the animation expert. So for me, animations on the web or any form of animation, like I just don't have the brain for it. So like the most animation you will see on my project is transitions, which is CSS animations, which is like, on hover to do stuff. But like what is the fundamentals when it comes to animating on the web and getting it right? Because of course I've seen some websites with lots of animation and it janks when you scroll. So like what makes good animations on the web?
Yeah, I mean, smooth performance is definitely one of them. Not being overbearing, like it's good that you stick to CSS transitions. Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the majority of what I use Motion for. And the nice thing about Motion's API is that you can just write. You don't even really need to have an opinion on what the animation looks like. You can just kind of turn a div or something into a motion.div, as we'll see later. And out of the box, you get like a bunch of defaults that are like, it depends on the value, but like some are spring powered and some, they're all meant to be, it's all meant to feel like nice out of the box. So that the idea is that it's even simpler than CSS transitions, because I agree that animations are like way too hard, basically.
Mm,
Yeah, and so, but in terms of animation principles,
mm,
I'm not big. If you go to the motion.dev homepage, like a lot of there's some subtle animations in there, and especially when there's a little bit that shows off some of the things it can do. But the website's actually pretty sober. Like it's not like if you go to some animation library, isn't shade, but like if you go to other websites, it's like we fucking animate stuff. Like have a look at this. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and you're like, whoa, okay. Like it does look amazing. Like, and I love these sites, I do. But I also wanted to impart a bit of my own philosophy, I guess, into this website. And that is that not everything needs to be animated, I guess is what I'm,
Mm,
trying to say. Um,
mm,
and so I think restraint and performance are the two things that I think makes a good animation. And the other thing is that's the nice thing about motion. Like when we talk about performance, like it's got like a hybrid engine, which means like it has a JavaScript animation engine in it, but it can also leverage the browser's inbuilt animation. So when you do a CSS transition, often
mm,
that will be hardware accelerated. It just means like if there's any like stuff happening on your page, like your page is doing something with JavaScript, your animations don't slow down typically when you're using CSS. But that's also true in motion. So like if you do something that can be hardware accelerated, like opacity or transform, then by default that will most likely run on the GPU, which will give you like a smoother. So I'm not so much concerned about like we can animate 10,000 elements at 60 frames a second. So I'm not going to animate 10,000 elements. What I want is to make sure the one element that does animate, that one animates smoothly because it's not interrupted by like a busy CPU or anything like that.
mm. Awesome. Like I'm I'm on the motion.dev website right now, and you're right, it's pretty, like most times when I see animations on the web, it's sort of a lot. This is one of my pet peeves. Like, when you scroll down a website and things are flying in, and then when you scrolling back up, I expect that those animations don't fly in anymore. But it's on autoplay, right? Like it flies in when you scroll down, also flies in when you scroll down again. So too much animation on the web sort of make me this very minimalist when it comes to animation. And I see even if you are an animation expert, you're making really good use of animations on the web page. On the landing page, it's pretty simple. When you hover on stuff, you get to see a little pop-up, and it's just elegant and, uh, for the lack of a better word, minimalist, because you're using animations that work for the purpose. I like it. And then, of course, there's this really rich. I like the animations I'm seeing. So, off the top of your head, I see a couple of animations here, right? Like, what are the use cases like you've used in your projects, and you're going to give us pros and cons of animation based on real world use cases and where to use animation and where not to. Because since I think animations is just too much, especially for landing pages, like things that have copies and all, and all my apps I just use transitions. So where do you draw the line between animation helping the UI and the UX, and animation really make the user have crappy experiences?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like something that informs the user of something that's changed is like the fundamental use case for a UI animation. So if something's
Mm,
like, let's say that you've clicked on something like a button and a modal opens up. It's one thing to open the modal and this is what I do. I normally do this, and this is fine. So the first step would be to like just show the modal. And I always feel like that's a little bit, it's like, boom, there's the modal and there's no animation. And for me, that's a little, because there's two things. One, you haven't informed people that something's changed. but two, like when you animate that in a nice way, you're also kind of like you're I personally feel like you're imparting a level of confidence, if you know what I
Mm,
mean. Like, because you're saying like I've thought about this. Like just be like this is something else that we've polished. This is an extra step. It's not just the visual design that's really nice, but we've made this transition feel good and high quality and smooth. Um, so there's letting people time adjust to the change. Like you're processing the information as things are changing. Like this whole screen's like getting blacked out, and this information box is moving into the screen. Um, by adding a transition, you're kind of and a nice one as well. Like, so it could be a fade in, which is kind of like the very most basic thing you could do. Or you could add like a little scale thing or a rotation or a bit, maybe it blurs out, it blurs into view, like it starts blurry and then comes into focus. Like just like nothing too extravagant. You know, all these things can be done with like very small values. Like if it's a Y transition, it can be that, 10 pixels, 20 pixels. If it's a scaled transition, it starts at 0.9, not zero, and it's like bam, like it's something quite subtle, but it's just something that gives people time to like adjust to the new state of the UI. Um, and that sort of like the amount of time that animation can take is sort of proportional to the amount of times that the user is going to do it. So if this is like you're opening a sub menu, and people are always doing this, like if you go to your MacBook and you click on file right now, it doesn't animate, it just comes straight in. But you this is probably the millionth time that you've done that, so you don't need an
mhm,
animation. You're kind of expecting it already. But if this is the first time, what I always think would be a cool idea is like if this is the first time that this happens, that it animates,
mhm.
and then the second time it animates like twice as fast, then the third time and thereafter it never animates. Um, just so you getting, building that sort of level of trust before it starts to get annoying. Like I don't need that long animation every time. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's like ramble, but what I'm trying to say, there's another level where I wonder if and this can be like distracting as well. So you've got to be careful. But I feel like there's another bit where if you clicked on the button and the modal opens up as a result of that action, you can sort of like have the origin start in the vicinity of that button. So it looks like the modals come out. It doesn't have to be too, it doesn't even need to be super precise, like the buttons morphing into the modal. It doesn't need to be like that, but it's enough motion um, to sort of lead your eye to the next part of the UI.
Mm,
Likewise, you close it and you go back to where you were. And this isn't, I'm not saying this is, I haven't done it, like, but it would be cooler to do it. I think that so there's all these
mhm,
basically this whole gradient of animations that you can and put in, and I think generally some is better than none. So like that fade in is better than just opening a modal. As long as
mm,
it's not like just make it 0.3 seconds. That's like the general motion default, and I think that's enough for
mm.
for most things.
Yeah, I think so too. So while you mentioned like the Mac OS, file menu, like I think Apple or the Mac team or just like Apple's product, they really make good use of animations that I like. So for example, on my iPhone, if I hit the volume key, like the actual volume key, they sort of push the like it animates the background a little bit, showing the push. Like they didn't have to do that because of course I know I'm pressing stuff, but that experience that it's really good and welcoming. I sort of like it. It's funny. It's fun, but it's also giving me more feedback that okay. So if for example something happened to the volume key, I would know that even if it's I'm hitting that button, nothing is happening because I can't see that animation. So I feel just like you say, it's this extra step of feedback based on like motion. Of course, you could write text on the screen like okay, loading, but when we see like a loading spinner, for example, it's like I don't know if it's another dimension of feedback, the motion bit, more like the as an add-on to the textual bit. But I think it really makes sense when it comes to giving feedback. You think
Yeah,
so?
and I love that you brought up the volume example as well, because
Mm,
that's one of the most this is one of the most unlikely animations that you tend to find, especially on the web, which is negative
Yeah.
feedback, or like say you've got a carousel,
Mhm.
and you've made it all the way to the end of the carousel, but maybe the buttons faded out. Um, I hate it when you like click one of those buttons and like nothing happens. And I get that the button's disabled because you've got the visual indication that that it's like semi-transparent or maybe it's grayed out or something. But this, like, I'm still clicking it. If this is a real button, like I'd still be able to press it visually, and like say an iPhone's a great example. Like if I click this, like it gives me
Mhm.
like I know that I've clicked the button. It doesn't just like because I'm at max volume. It doesn't just
Mhm.
like stop clicking. It's so that's weird.
Yeah.
So for number one, but then that animation that they added, like you say, when you get to the end of the limits of the slider, essentially, or the volume, the volume thing, it will still show you on the UI that you're clicking it, but you just can't
Mhm.
you can't go any further. And that's one of the examples. Probably I could show you it, but I wouldn't. It's probably a
I
bit
want to
complex
see
to go
that.
through today. But it's just a rip
Yeah.
of the iOS slider. Um, but what I love about it is that, and this is taken from their behavior, is that when you pull um, when you're changing the value of like the brightness slider and you pull past the limit of the thing, so you turn the volume all the way down, your finger goes, the whole thing sort of does this
Mhm.
tug. And it's the same with the carousel. Like if you press that button and you're at the end and there's no more pages to get to, don't just do nothing. Like do a little like a little like a tug animation or
Mhm.
something. It just shows you. It just again, it's like imparting that feeling of like we don't worry, we've thought about this or we've got this, and it's
Yeah.
it's part confidence and it's part imparting to the user, yeah, there's nothing here, but nothing's broken.
Mhm.
Like we're handling
Yeah.
this, like we have thought that you're going to do this and get to the end. And so
Mhm.
there's, I don't know, it's just that this whole those are the two, because most of the time when people will talk about animations, it's kind of always in the stock answer is like you're just gonna um, teach people what's changed and stuff like that. But I do also think there's a
Mhm.
whole thing of messaging about like confidence and
Mhm.
there's something more to it than just transitioning between
Mhm.
two things. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there should be like a branch of what we do in engineering or on the web called um animation design, because like you mentioned, you keep saying they thought about this, but do you think, because it's like accessibility, it's it's not all that a big of a deal, or except it is, but we most developers don't really like, okay, I'm going to build a website and I'm starting with accessibility from day one. So something like that with animation is more like an afterthought, right? Like, okay, what's this fancy thing I could just put? Like, I think there should be like a deeper, or maybe like our frameworks or libraries, like what you're doing with motion, which is a good segue to motion. Um, there should be like a bit of thought as to, at the baseline, having great animation experiences for apps that just work at the baseline. Then you could, and of course, we need to encourage having this animation design. Like that's what I'm just gonna call it, because I think it's way better. It's way, like, it's a lot more than just making things smooth. Like, why are they moving? And like, is the move intentional? Should they move or should they zoom? Like, it sounds like a lot.
Yeah, and like there's I suppose there's I'm like drawing the triangle, but there's kind of like a hierarchy or and I feel like visual design, because everyone can look at something and go, well, that looks nice. Well, not everyone, but like, but then, and that's where you get into accessibility. So to fill in the
Mhm.
rest of that picture, at that point, animation almost feels like, well, okay, we 90% of what we're going to get from this is via our visual design. Great. And then like the
Mhm.
next chunk of it is going to be like, how well did we make this accessible? And then and most sites accessibility is shocking anyway. So most people don't even get to that bit, and that chunk that's going to be a big thing. And then it always feels like the animation. even though animation plays into accessibility, and with a lot of the demos, I've tried to, even when it's like the Apple Touch demo, I've tried to add
Mhm.
accessibility. Like what happens when someone taps onto this slider, and what happens when they click with the up and down arrows to move the slider up and down. What happens when
Mhm.
you get to the end? You still want that tug animation because you want people who are on a keyboard to have just as good an experience as people using touch. But at the same
Mhm.
time, like that's now we're talking. So now you're not just doing animations; you're doing accessible animations. Most people don't have the time
Mhm.
for this. This is the thing. Like,
Yeah.
so no one's thinking about it, and that's the point of the whole point of motion is to make things um, like I want it to be limitless so that you can do anything, but I also want it to be so easy to do that there's kind of no excuse for not doing them anymore. That's the big driving force behind motion. It's to make it because CSS and native browser APIs are getting pretty good. But if you look at a view transition, um, and that API, and you've got all these pseudo selectors that you have to use, and you always there's a lot of name management, blah blah blah. Like it's possible to do these things, but is it nice? Like, is it easy to maintain? Like, still no. And so you know, that's why I just feel like even as CSS and browser APIs get better, that's stuff I can leverage to make it simpler for people to make animations, and not in a way that like you get some libraries, which is also great. Like, but you get a lot of libraries where it's like, here's the bounce in animation. I don't want to be that. I don't want to. I've never wanted to make something that prescriptive, and I don't think you need to really. It's more like how can we make this transform animation as easy as possible? Oh well, X colon 100, rather than like if you've ever had to write a CSS transform. I don't know, like even that annoys me. Like, oh, I'm all right in translate X, like X. There should be a style called X. That fact that there isn't is
Yeah.
like that's the sort of thing that bugs me, and why I feel like there's room that, and probably will always be room for the motion
Mhm.
in general.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm gonna take it that motion has good default opinion. So before we get into the code, because of course we are talking about animation, we have to see them. Like what is the value prop for motion? I know you've touched about like you touched on it a little in your answer, but what is the value prop for motion as opposed to like doing things in just the CSS animations or any other animation library out there? Like, what's the value? And thank you so much for bringing it to Vue because I'm a big Vue lover and I love that. So, but what's the value prop for motion as opposed to like why should I pick motion than any other thing else?
So like I think there's a ton of stuff like in the sense of like, well, there's things that you can do with motion that you simply can't do without it, like the layout animations. There's things like we'll always do things in the most performant way. So for instance, if it's possible to run a hardware accelerated scroll animation, then we'll do it. But if you've
Mm.
chosen certain options or animating certain values that aren't possible to be hardware accelerated, um, then we'll drop down to that the JavaScript animation engine. It makes it super easy to do things like I don't know if you've ever had this, but like if you try and like animate an element with a transform, but then you also want it to be like hoverable with a scale transform, but the scale's different to
Mm.
the X. Now you can't. How do you combine these transforms? Like, do you make all these different states where they are just like this whole matrix of states? Whereas in motion, you can
Mm.
animate them all individually. And there's I feel like that's all true, but for me, the real reason that I think gets overlooked quite a lot, I like taking complexity out of your apps just to throw in another one there. Like when you like a lot of people say like, oh, I did this without a JS animation library, but then you look at the code and it's a mess. Like, and they're
Mm.
using so many tricks and CS, all this shit, and it's just well, you could have just done that easily, like with a bit more payload, with an animation library, but um, for me, it's the knowledge that you need to know all of CSS animations and their JavaScript API equivalents, to know when to use each one, it's kind of like a huge galaxy of quite unpleasant and quite difficult to maintain APIs. So what I want with Motion is that you only need to learn the one thing. And there's still lots to learn. You can dig in as much as you want with Motion, but there's ultimately only a few fundamental principles. And it should make most things really easy. And that for me is the unique value proposition. It's that you can do anything, you can go way beyond what the browser will let you do normally, but on the way you've also written like cleaner code, easier to maintain, still super performant. But you're not ever getting into that situation which you might have done in the past where you go, oh well, I actually need to do this thing, and then someone's like, wow, you can't use CSS transitions for that. After that, you've got to use this thing, or you've got to dip into JavaScript. Like you're already there in the first place. Like you never hit that wall of like, oh, now I've got to learn this other thing. I don't know. That's for me the nice thing about using
Mm.
this.
Yeah, I think you sold me on the cleaner code because I the way I adopt library, I'm very strict. Like if it's gonna first of all, it's gonna be heavy, no, thank you. If the API to use it is very messy, no, thank you. Like it's actually that's why Tailwind clicked for me. And for the longest time, I didn't pick like a UI library because I just felt it was too much API to learn and it's too many props and all that. So I was just using vanilla Tailwind. And then I found something that also gave me the same flexibility that Tailwind. I mostly like that I understand how the code work. If and the less code I get to write to use something, the more I understand it. So especially for something like animation library, I really want it to be clean. So I'm hearing you on that, and so I think I want to see it now. I think we've been talking animation for like half an hour. So let's see motion, the examples you've prepared, and then I quiz because I'm really interested. I'm interested to see like the API for using motion.
Cool. Okay. First of all, I'll just quickly show you because I keep on gabbing on about it. This is more of an advanced example that we
Okay.
probably won't look at. I mean, this is the iris example, the
Ooh.
slider that I was telling you about, and it
Mm-hmm.
works the same way. Where if you um, pull past
Oh
the
my god.
by the limits, and it will do this tug basically. This is actually, I feel a bit cheeky to show you this because like as part of like going independent, I had to make like a premium set
Yeah,
of
of
features
course.
basically. And so when you go into this other sort because I'm logged in, but this is like a motion plus
Mhm.
only things. So
Okay.
and the source code is quite a lot in there. I mean, I'll show you the source code. It's not like secret or anything, but um, yeah, everything's commented.
Oh,
You can copy it. You can
okay.
open it in Vercel
Oh,
um,
nice.
into their V0 AI editor. And this one, not all of them do, but like this one comes with a tutorial as well, which is quite nice. Um,
Mm,
so oh, and the other reason I wanted to show you this was because I was talking about the keyboard accessibility. So I just tabbed onto it, and then as I
mm.
press up and down keys, it'll like increment and decrement. But even when you like get
That's fun.
to the edges, it will pop like that.
Mhm.
But anyway, sorry, this isn't one I wanted to get it just because I've referenced it so
Yeah.
many times. So
Yeah,
this is
it's amazing.
I think, but
Mhm.
this is the probably the most basic but the most basic animation. You can see here that this source code is like what I'm editing here because I'm running a local version of the site here. Um,
Mm,
and so all of these examples are sort of made so that they're one file, so you can just go in and copy paste, whatever animation it's demonstrating. But we don't have an animation in this one because I
yeah.
deleted it. Um, so yeah, if I refresh here, then obviously nothing runs. So this is a good blank state to sort of show you, uh, show you how motion works. And so um, you can see the auto suggest has also already come up with what I wanted, what I'm about to write.
Of course.
The Yeah, of course, yes. I'm just a tab monkey. I mean, the tab key is going to be demolished by the end of this week. It's taken over so much of my job. Um,
Yeah.
so the we can we go? Oh, okay. So yeah, so we've got a div, and it's there's basically no markup here. It's a div that styled like this ball, and the most basic way to animate in motion is by importing. I'll just type it. I'll just pretend that I've used the other keys recently.
Mm.
It's by importing the motion the motion component. This is like lowercase to sort of encourage this pattern, which I'll show you, which is like motion. I should have turned off all of these suggestion dialogues.
Mm.
But the motion.div is exactly the same as oh yeah. So this is Next.js. So let's just
Okay.
yeah. You don't always have to do this. You could there's also like a React client and entry point, but this will do. Yeah. So this is exactly the same. Takes all the same props, and you can make a motion. This could be like a motion section. It'll look the same because it's got the same CSS. Or let's just keep it as a div for now. But basically, any HTML or SVG element, like you just write here, and then all of the props and types work the same. Except now that you've also got like special, you've got special props, special animation props. So you can do things like, well, it can either read from the initial styles, but I like initial because initial has support for. Oh, so does style actually, because it's now this is like now a special style prop, which so you can do stuff like individual transforms. So you can do like 20. So is it you can do scale X, Y. From on the ball here, but I'll just turn opacity to 0. But let's do 0.5. So you can see now that it's applied this. Normally you'd have to write like transform, yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Scale, the whole thing. But here you can just write this. But what we can do is it's got this is the main prop. This is the main guide. Like you just do animate equals and it's I mean it's done some good auto suggest. Let's see if I can pull this out a little bit just so you can see we've got scale 1 y0 opacity 1 and it's already chosen like a nice default. Like you can see that the if I take the Y off, I think it's kind of nicer because it'll come out from the center. There's like a soft spring. It's only going from 0. If we were doing a bigger distance, it would like do a bit more of a spring. But what you can then do is you can add a transition where you can either do you can do easing functions. So you could do ease out. And then now this whole animation will use it ease out. But then you can be like, well, the scale, I want to have a spring. So you can type spring. And then you can give it like, we actually recently added this new way of defining springs, which is called like visual duration. And by that, you can say 0.5, but then there's like a bounce value. I don't want it to be also like 0.3, where 1 is like very bouncy and 0 is no bounce. And what visual duration and the way that differs from we can like whack that up as well. Where that differs from duration is that visual duration is the amount of time it takes to kind of get to the target, not including all the bounciness. And that makes it really easy to match with other values like that are using non-spring physics. So you can see that because if you did it this way, look, I'll show you this. This will be like really quite severe because now we've compressed the whole spring into 0.5 seconds, so it'll be quite severe. But you can see they don't really match up as well as nicely. So I've really taken to using this visual direction. Anyway, that's your basic animation. I think it's sensible defaults plus just a few options. Yeah. Is there anything? Any questions?
I think I like the API already. Yeah, I like the API already, and if it's really good. So it's interesting how the motion component can just all you have to do is motion dot whatever HTML element you want to animate, and it works. And the API looks clean enough for me. And so yeah, but of course we're just making the ball bounce or bounce in. So let's so the visual duration, can you talk can you explain it a little bit more?
Yeah, I can actually explain with the magic of example. Let's have a I think it's on here. So there's actually a spring visualizer in the docs.
Okay.
And what we've got here is there's basically there's two ways of defining a spring in frame of motion. There's physics, which is stiffness, and you can see that as you increase the stiffness, like the like this would take a much longer time. Very soft sort of animation. It'll take a little while to complete, and then you get this dampening. And as you decrease the damping, you get more bounciness, essentially. And that's relative. These are relative as well to each other, so they have a relationship. And mass as well it will make things feel a bit lethargic, but people don't really like physics-based springs are great when you're doing something with when you're like feeding an animation into the next animation, or let's have a look at this is the one I want to show you. So, or as we're going to see, this one, this will do. So with this one, all of these balls are attached to the pointer with a spring, whichever one I'm like. And the only reason they can move like this is because I'm using physics-based springs. But I feel like intuitively, most people would probably prefer duration-based springs, partly because it's like easier to coordinate with the other animations that are like tween-based. Like if you say, I want this one to be 1 second, and now I'm trying to figure out what sort of damping and stiffness combination is going to get me a spring that's also roughly a second, then that's kind of difficult. But with duration and bounce, what you're basically saying, let's just take this off. So this line represents when the animation hits like its target, basically. And you can see here that if I increase the duration, like this is 1 second here. But now if I decrease bounce, this works kind of as you expect. If I increase the bounce, bearing in mind that this center point here is the target value, right? So if I increase this a lot, well, the animation is still 1 second. But you can see here, what's going to happen is that it's going to hit this midpoint very quickly. That's like the way we perceive the animation to work. So, and all of this is kind of, this is like the bounciness after so this is where we hit. And then all of this, and so we squished it all into a second. So what visual duration does, I can show you. I can show you this. So what did we have? A duration of 1. Yeah, and it was quite a high bounce as well. Let's do 9. I think it was 9.5. So that's kind of what that looks like. Like it might not even stream that well because it's so severe. It's like bam, straight
Yeah.
away, and you can't really. It's not very nice to coordinate that with this, duration. So we have this extra one that we've added, which is visual duration. And this isn't like when it first hits, but it's kind of when it settles down. So like if you so you still got this second marker, or let's bring it down to 0.5. You can see now that as you decrease that the bounciness happens after the fact, and this just makes it really easy to coordinate with. So now if I change this to visual duration and I change this to 1, you'll see that the opacity and the scale will feel like they kind of got there at the same amount of time. And likewise, this spring animation, it kind of took a second, like 1 second, to get to its target or to settle thereabouts. But all of this bounciness is like happening after the fact. And what the nice thing about that is I can like link opacity and scale, one with using spring animations and one using like an easing curve of some sort. This could be anything. And I can just change the bounciness, but they're always going to feel like they're connected in that way. So it's just an easier way of orchestrating springs, which are like spring physics are useful and quite good. Duration is it makes sense why we did that one first as it was, but personally, like it's just not very easy to orchestrate with other animations. Basically, it has its uses, but I think this visual duration approach is more helpful from my perspective.
That's true.
But anyway, yeah. So, but like I say, the most of the time I'm sort of using it like this. I don't often like even define anything. I'm just like, oh, quite like it's quick. They're quick animations, like they feel responsive. So the idea is that with CSS, every time that you write transition, you're kind of opting that property into an animation. But you kind of then have to make a choice, like how do I want it to animate? Whereas with motion, you've kind of already said that you want these things to animate because it's an explicit animate prop. So you can just let the defaults, like the default springs and easings, like take it for you, and you'll end up with a responsive feeling animation.
Yeah. Amazing. So I set my CSS any way I want to do it, like maybe using Tailwind. And with motion, I just have to tell it to animate. So like a scale and all the CSS properties. And it just work. I think I like it. So yeah, like if I take out the const ball object, the only motion bit is just motion.div then animate, because that's would definitely live in my CSS already. So like Tailwind or whatever, and it just animates. I like it.
Yeah, and that's the whole. I mean, a lot of the API for this motion component is basically this. So, like, you can add things like while hover, and you can say like, oh well, if I hover over it, I want it to like sort of jump up a little, so it that that it's responding to my cursor, and then you've got while tap, so you can say, well, okay, well, I've got my finger down on it, like it's gonna pop in, and again, like this is all using. This is all using the default transitions. And the nice thing about this approach, I mean, I chose some quite subtle for the live stream. I don't know if that's let's just make it wacky. You wouldn't do this in real life.
Of
Yeah,
course.
okay, that's a bit more obvious. Please don't do this. But the nice thing is as well about the gesture handling in here is it's just that it goes that little bit further than CSS, where, for instance, CSS also browsers like polyfill touch into hovers, so you often end up with these weird states where something gets like the hover event and no unhover event, and it's just like it gets bigger and stuff. Or press events happen on right click and other pointers, whereas motion like filters out all these secondary pointers and right clicks and stuff like that. And if I hover off, because I've still pressed it, that press takes precedence. I've got my finger down at the moment, and it's only when I let go, and you see that when I let go, it animated back to scale 1. Whereas if I let go and we're still hovering, it'll animate back to scale 1.4. So it handles all these little things as well that sort of like bring the typical web experience. Like it just doesn't feel as good as an app, for instance. So it
Mm.
smooths over a lot of these little things.
How do we animate colors on the ball, and also how do we make the ball pulsate? And I have, if you're up for it, because when I did this little animation on I'm going to send you the link. So like when I did this little animation on the buy ticket button, I don't know how I think I copied the CSS somewhere, to be honest. Like you see how the thing happened, but I'm kind of interested in seeing how you would do that in motion, because these are the sort
Oh
of use
yeah.
cases. Like this is the only animation I did here on this page. Yeah, and I don't know what level of CSS. I think I probably was have asked ChatGPT about that, because I just made it work somehow. But
That's
I don't know
funny.
what I
Yeah,
was
because
doing
it's
there.
look. Well, let's take a look at the background color and because I've always
Okay.
these pulsate ones. Have I got an example of this on the site? I always feel like every time I come to this problem, I have to uh like I come up with it again. Oh, how's it done this? Let me
Yeah,
let's
one
start
second.
with the one on off the back of my head. So so
Mm-hmm.
there was first the background color. So that's fairly simple, and we can even use CSS variables. So um
Mm-hmm.
we can do something like you know like this.
Mm-hmm.
Set a CSS thing, and then we can go background color uh, var red. Sorry, so it's like the CSS property, and now when we refresh, it'll animate from pink
Mm.
to red. Or we can do, uh, white, and so now when we hover over it, it will go from white back to red, defined as a CSS variable. Um,
Nice.
and then also the pulse was yeah. So that one looked like it was using background shadow or box shadow, sorry. I'd
Okay.
probably use, so for an animation, there's this thing called, so this basically motion can, and I think this is basically a hard coded list, but it's because these are the most
Yes.
commonly um, hardware accelerated values. So you've got like transforms, opacity, clip path, and filter. And filter has an alternative to box shadow called drop shadow. And the nice thing about this is that it is hardware accelerated. So what you can do here is let's get rid of all let's just concentrate on the this stuff. Blah blah blah. Let's see if we can get rid of that. And
Mm-hmm.
let's get rid of that. Okay, so for this we can do. Oh yeah. Let's probably refresh it. So we can use filter, and this is quite nice because what we can use here is an array, and an array lets us write multiple multiple keyframes. So if let's just try the syntax. I can't remember the syntax first, but so it's something like drop shadow. Oh yeah, there we go. So let's make it white. But
Ooh.
does drop shadow let you do this? I'm not sure it lets you do it. It must do. That's the offset. So let's do 0 pixels.
Mm.
I'm wondering, does it let you change the blur?
I don't know.
Change. Because the nice thing about box shadow
Mm.
that you let's see, maybe you can't. Oh, that would be a shame. Yeah, I don't think you can.
Oh,
Yeah, what we want is like
wow.
a solid one. So let's just do, yeah. Well, let's hope that some clever person knows how to do it. So, okay, I'll take back everything I said. We're going to do a slow animation using box shadow. And this
Okay.
one is going to be, so we want it offset by, in fact, we're not, so we always want it from the center, so we can do 0, 0. and then we want it to start like with no. We never want blur, and then we want it to not really go anywhere. And so let's do white. We'll change this. We'll make this cooler in a second. So now we've got our, that's kind of, okay, this is what I'm after. And that filter, let's take that filter off. Okay, so now we want a transition which repeats this forever. And we want it to, maybe, do you want a little delay? Let's try a little delay. And we don't want it too crazy, so let's just do a whole second. Let's have a look. I don't think ease out's right. It seems to be getting slower as it pulses out, and let's just try linear for a second.
Okay.
I'm not sure I love it, but the important thing here is that we want it to be this color. So what's we're using this one? Yeah. So okay, I'd rather like use the RGB value of this. I'm not like not great at converting hex. So whoa, I wasn't expecting that.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
No, that was
Thank you,
useful.
VS
What
Code.
was that? 221238. The reason why I wanted RGB was because it's just nicer to do opacity. Like with hex, you can do opacity like with another value like this, but I just don't like it, basically. And so what we want it to fade out, don't we? But we also never want it to really be in. So we can maybe we start it like 0.4, and then it fades out completely. And that looks better, but I think we could maybe just make it really crazy. Like,
Yes.
Okay, yeah, perfect. It's a shame we can't do that filter. I'm sure there must be a way. But anyway, in lieu of that, this works, and that's basically it. Like, and you could also do something like, is this cool?
Yeah.
No, I don't like this. There's something in a scale, a combined.
Okay.
There's something in a little scale that pushes this outline out, basically. But anyway, yeah. So that's essentially how you do it. And so you can see here that we've got a lot of the same values. You've also got this repeat delay, which is a nice addition to the motion API that you don't get in CSS. With duration, this is always defined in seconds because we did some user testing on it back when we did the frame of motion API, and people just understand it better, which is nice. And then repeat infinity, which is just the JavaScript keyword.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for my implementation. I'm gonna compare the bits. Oh, where did I do that? Fine, take it. Yeah, okay, this should be the bad boy. So do I think I might have gone into CSS for this one. Yeah, test clip. Okay, cool. Oh yes, I did go into that. So I'm using box shadow, and then I have like a glow ring. Then I had to do like a little bit of WebKit. Okay, no, not WebKit. So just glow ring, box shadow. Yeah. Then it add glow keyframe. Dope. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, that's sort of like to reduce the distance, like to convert this into a keyframed animation. And to be honest, you could have actually just set this as the initial. This would also work, to be honest.
Okay.
If we put that on the ball, was that it? And then make this not keyframes. This would also work. Think about it.
That's cool. Like it.
But it's nice that you know, if you wanted to jump back and forth between those two sorts of implementations in CSS, you'd have to redo the whole thing, like go from a CSS transition to the animation keyframe syntax. And you could, whereas I've just like oh, actually, I think it'll work with one keyframe. Let's just turn the array into a string. I'm just going to show you the my favorite. Probably this is my favorite probably part of the whole thing. So let's get rid of that. Maybe let's make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we've got this. We've got a div like up here that's like a 140 view height. So we've got to scroll a little bit to see our ball.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the superpower that I wish all elements had. Like a while in view. So rather than messing around with a intersection observer, we get this. We just have this while in view prop. It uses an intersection observer under the hood. But you can see now that when we come in, hold on. Let's get rid of that. That was repeating infinitely. Yeah, when we go down, it'll animate in, and when we go out, you can see in here it says it's animated out.
Yeah.
And so, and the other nice thing about this is that because it is using an intersection observer under the hood, you get these. These callbacks that you don't get. Like this is what you want. You want like element.add event listener in view in HTML, and then when you enter, like you see that it's just as easy to do. So see, this is really helpful for doing these callbacks. Really helpful for doing things like infinite loading and stuff like that. You just have like you can even use the motion div and on viewport enter like load more items, like this sort of thing, which is nice.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Like, I like the API already. It looks like something I would definitely use myself. So, any other example you want to show? Because we're at our mark. Any other like complicated thing you want to touch on? Any motion API that you're excited about to show?
Yeah, I'll quickly show layout animations, and maybe we won't go through this. Well, we might have to, but we'll make it quick because I'm getting kicked out the show in 15 minutes. But it's not this one, is it? I've got it open already. Blah blah blah. Let's skip that. Layout animation. So here we've got a toggle, and it's sort of when I click it, it just sort of the way it works is that we change justify content to start and end, which is kind of how this is how, like, if you want to write this in CSS, this is how you would do it, and this is how you should do it, right? And the idea behind layout animations is just to be able to animate layout. So normally if you wanted to turn this into a animation, you'd start adding transform. Like, so instead of flex justify content, you're saying, okay, well, actually, maybe I need to do a transform, and that's how far is that? Like 157 pixels. Do you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. And and especially when you start adding in different breakpoints and stuff, this becomes kind of unmanageable. But with this prop called the layout prop, so I've just added the word layout to my motion div onto this. This is a motion div here. Now when I click it, nothing happens. But if I refresh the page, it will animate between the two layouts. And so what this is doing is computing the difference between the two layouts, and it will basically apply a reverse transform to get it back to where it started. And this is like something that other animations libraries do. But the thing that makes motions layout animations different is that we've got this. Let me put me down a little. Ignore the weird aspect ratios. There we go. Okay, perfect. So we handle those transforms like an infinitely deep tree. So essentially what that means is, and we can also do it across different elements. So this is a list of items. When I click on this, this modal is separate. Like it's a completely different element to, so you can see ignore the interface, but you see the list item still there. But when we click on it, you can see that it's got a transform applied to it that makes it look like it's in this position and in this size. And likewise, this text is also they've all got these like transforms. I don't know how easy it is to see these, but so they're matching now, but they're opacity zero, so you can't see them. You only see them for the transition. But the point is, if you look at these, when you do animations like this and you're changing the size of something with scale, normally what will happen is that things will look squished and stretched. But because of the way that layout animations work, you can run an animation like this and the text will stay and the image, nothing's getting distorted. The corner border radius, whereas usually these sorts of things would distort basically. And likewise, this is essentially the code for this. This isn't the same, but the same fundamental principle here. This will be the last thing I'll show you, but this isn't quite as good. But this is the very reduced version of that. This underline. Let's change the color a bit just so you can see. Let's just make it bolder. So I'll do that. Oh, that'll do. Okay, we'll get the same thing as before. The way this is rendered, and this might be a bit. This is a lot to pass at once, but essentially what we're looking at is this. And so every tab item has a component, which is this whole thing here. But in it conditionally renders a motion div. And that motion div has a layout ID called underline. Now, when I click on this one, lettuce, what's happening is tomato stops rendering underline and lettuce starts rendering a component called underline. And it matches them. So it knows that it's been removed over here and added over here, and it will animate it out using these layout animations. And it's the same. This is the same principle driving this App Store example. The text here has a layout ID. The picture has a layout ID, and the container has a layout ID. And between these three things, when I click open, we didn't even have to remove the item it knows that it came from, there was already one there, so it will animate out from there. And then when I remove the modal, because in the sticking to the principles of like making this simple, in the code for this modal, it's just a Boolean. Again, it's exactly like this. Like it's which modal is open. It will render that modal, but because it's got layout IDs applied, it will automatically animate out of and back to the item that's been opened.
Nice.
This is amazing. That was the speed run of what I was gonna. If I stop sharing, that was the speed run of the rest of what I had to show you. I think I took a fairly long time on that initial one, but that's my.
I love it. I definitely gonna be playing with motion because I like the API, like I said before, and I have some projects in the future that might benefit from like having a more pragmatic motion library. So thank you so much, Matt, for showing me that. As we wrap up, anything you want to plug before we go?
No, I mean, other than obviously motion.dev, that's the documentation of motion, and then also motion plus, which is like there's exclusive components like the split text and animate number, animate cursor, things like extra value of view transitions API for vanilla JS users. That's what I want to plug. Yeah, that's it. Motion plus puts the food on the table. But failing that,
for sure.
motion.dev, check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.